Okay, today we're going to start with a quote and work our way out from there. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. Friedrich Nietzsche. I feel like this is everyone right now. I am watching people on the left and the right call each other monsters, Nazis, fascists, socialists, communists, whatever pejorative it is that you want to go throw out, racists. And so if everybody on the other side, on the opposition, is Hitler or a fascist, then all you have to do is be an anti-fascist, and it justifies all of the most horrible things that you would do. I would imagine that Tyler, if you ask him what he had going on, probably in his mind thought he was behaving altruistically. He thought he was doing something for his own perceived greater good. And then now the right is looking at this and they're pretty riled up. And so everybody from Nick Fuentes on down is talking about how it's time to go do something about this, etc., etc. I don't think anybody knows what to do about it. I think the problem is that you're gazing into an abyss, and that abyss will eat you alive. There's only one way out, and that's like up the ladder of logic and reason and compassion. We have descended. We went and dropped down the rabbit hole. And that rabbit hole never ends. It's just a trench, like a black hole. But there is a way to get out. And that way is, like I said, we have to start using our minds, having forward thought. That's where compassion is going to come from. Thinking about tomorrow, thinking about your relationships with your neighbors and your friends and your family, not right now in the moment where you want to argue with them about whatever thing it is that we're arguing about. I find it most telling in all of this that, number one, they had the wrong guy 2 or 3 times. I don't remember how many people they arrested before they had the right guy. And then they were really excited that they had the right guy in 33 hours after, somebody turned him in. It wasn't like they sleuthed this individual out, which when you consider how much money we spend on infrastructure, on defense, you better believe that there's billions of dollars a year that are spent on police, law enforcement, that are supposed to stop events like this from happening and prevent them. So you would think there's some type of, security. That's what we're hoping for. Security would be prevention. Not only do we not get prevention, they can't apprehend the individual, within a reasonable amount of time unless that individual was turned in. It was the same thing with the Luigi. They had a hard time finding him until somebody spotted him and turned him in. It was the same thing all the way back. I used to live in Washington, D.C. when the D.C. sniper happened. And they had a hard time finding them until somebody spotted them over at a YMCA and turned them in. So they couldn't. 9/11 just happened. Prime example. Again, I was part of that day. I was a witness to it. I've seen what happened. I've held the plane parts in my hand from the Pentagon. And How would we not be able to stop that from happening that day? We do have things like air traffic control and NORAD, and people don't really, unless you've lived over there and been, you don't really realize how many bases there are over there. But, you from all the way down in Florida to all the way up the East Coast, there are Air Force bases, naval bases, the Pentagon itself is right across from the Pentagon itself is across the freeway from Arlington National Cemetery. I don't know about that day specifically, but Arlington National Cemetery has 3 flyovers a day for funerals, full honors funerals in the Air Force. So there's flyover formations daily there, and that was a business day. I know people that were over in the cemetery doing a mission that day. So yeah, if they can't stop any of this, what the hell are we paying taxes for? Something like 24 or 25 cents almost, whatever it is on the dollar, now goes just to the interest that they went and took debt in your name. And they didn't take, I hammer this home, they didn't take debt in your name to go solve homelessness or to go fix the drug problem or to go stop crime. They didn't go use they used it to go to war in other countries and to blow up bridges and to kill children, to support Israel, to support Ukraine. It's madness. And this is the distraction right here, right? So we go get looking, back to the quote, we go looking to fight monsters, and we end up fighting, first of all, the wrong monsters and applying the wrong solutions to those problems because all we want to do is feel better. All the way back to the romantic fantasy I've been talking about. We just want to feel better in the moment. I mean, this right now, this thing that's going on right here is prime that. The shooter, whatever his altruistic ideas were, he just wanted to, I don't know if it was for clout within the community that he found. Who knows what exactly his real reasons were, but I mean, you would have to understand that he thought he was fighting monsters, and then he definitely became one. And so we need to start using, because I promise you, logic and reason and parsimony, empathy and forward thought, thinking about how his family would feel. None of that mattered to him. What mattered to him was how he felt. What we have as a real problem is this labeling. So first we label the other as the enemy. And we use words like fascism. Rosie O'Donnell is making recordings on TikTok or whatever. And right now she is calling Trump a, quote, child predator. We have a child predator in the White House. And with hashtags resist fascism. So there's a fascist child predator in the White House right now. And I don't think people really understand because they don't actually use logic. But your brain is doing some thinking in the background, whether or not you have an internal monologue or dialogue or not, your brain is doing some processing. So you better believe if it can read the words resist fascism and it can hear Rosie O'Donnell calling the president of the United States a child predator, that then means by extension that MAGA or people who support Donald Trump or people in his administration are all by one degree or another supporting of a child predator and fascist, voting for a child predator and fascist. Do you understand how that works? There's no actual argument here. Calling him a child predator is just to go lash onto your feelings. It doesn't have to be true. Saying resist fascism, there doesn't have to be actual fascism going on. And the problem is these people that are saying resist fascism, what they want is fascism. They want to use force in order to get what they want. They want to use force in order to control the government. They want to use force in order to be able to stop these other people from having platforms. They were the ones that came up with cancel culture, etc. So, and I'm not blaming the left for the actions of whatever this kid is. Like, the whole funny thing about that is so if we had you went to go visit an asylum and there was a fella that they told you, well, he's got a 130 IQ. He's a real smart fella, but he writes all his equations on the walls in poop. Are you going to listen to anything that guy says? Are you going to take any of it seriously? Man, that guy could have wrote The Secret to Life, the Universe, and everything up on the wall. But if he wrote it in his poop, because he's crazy, you probably wouldn't take it very seriously. And the issue is that we've got a clearly, anybody that goes and commits cold-blooded murder is at a minimum a psychopath. We don't know what else they've got going on mentally, but obviously enough to be able to go commit cold-blooded murder, And when you go do that and use words like child predator and fascism, and you see now that it's quieted down a bit, everybody on the left is doubling down. Charlie Kirk was all those things too, racist and whatever, as though it's a justification for murdering him in cold blood. Where's the argument? Where's the rational, reasoned argument? How do we step our way out of this problem? Let's say I agree with you. Let's start where we agree. The government's full of fascists. Well, actually, in premise, I agree with you. Let's work our way out from that right there. And so, the amount of blaming left, right, it's a trans person, it's not. None of those matter at all whatsoever. In fact, if you were going to talk about them in any kind of meaningful way, you would talk about it like how we used to talk about it 20 years ago, before any of this madness kind of crept along. And what I don't understand how anybody isn't making the connection, but back in the day, you had Ed Gein or, all the other serial killers. If you just look at Silence of the Lambs, right? James Gumb, the serial killer in Silence of the Lambs, he was kind of built as a profile of several different people. Now, when we look at the profile of the real serial killers, the ones that actually went out and did it, we weren't so worried about their political affiliations. It was really just that person was a monster and they filleted people and put their bodies in the basement and saved their heads in jars or whatever all of them did, right? When Dahmer came along, I don't think anybody was talking about whether or not he was on the left or the right, or it mattered, or there was any political affiliation with who he killed. What point am I trying to make here is that for a person psychotic enough to go out and mass murder, or to, John Wayne Gacy, if that's not a mass murderer, I don't know what is. He just did it separated in time. And there might be something to, again, if you just look at the James Gum character from Silence of the Lambs, I mean, that was like a cross dresser, whatever, that was built into that character for a reason. It's because it's something that you see across those people. Maybe there's less operating serial killers, and those people just moved over to being whatever these are now. Statement killers, I guess. So if you were just going to go fulfill your sick fantasy, maybe you don't want to get away with it forever. And a lot of them back in the day ended up writing letters to the police and essentially trying to get caught. I mean, they were playing cat and mouse, but they were actually playing cat and mouse. Like, a lot of it for those people is they're tortured by the voices in their head or whatever it is, and they don't want to do it, but the voices make them do it. Right. And so, again, guy writes on the wall with poop. I don't care how smart it sounds, you're probably not going to take it very seriously. And we didn't used to. We just used to study those people. We literally pretty much used to be happy to just set them where they could talk to a doctor and we could try to figure out what the heck was wrong with them as a specimen for the rest of their days on Earth. Until what happens to them is like Dahmer or like Kaczynski. I don't think anybody really worried about whether or not Ted Kaczynski was a Republican or a Democrat or a socialist. And really, the Silence of the Lambs is just, it's perfect to point at that character in there because he had everything going on. He had the body dysmorphia. He thinks he's trans. He's tried a lot of things. What things has he tried? I mean, shoot, if you actually pay attention to that movie, I've watched it several times. I'm not watching it right now. You can see in there that he has, an American flag. He has a Nazi, what made himself like a Nazi quilt or something like that. There's Nazi imagery in there. And I think the thing that they're trying to tell you is just like Hannibal Lecter said, he's tried a lot of things. Okay. And that's what you get out of look at this current Tyler, whatever his name is. He's probably tried a lot of things to figure out what was going on with him. Who knows what it was? He didn't talk with his parents about it very much, seemingly. They would have been the only people that probably could have helped him. It looks like everybody else that he surrounded himself with helped him in the wrong direction. Spreading madness. Madness spreading madness. Back to the original point. He went and gazed into the abyss. And we need to see to it that we don't go do the same thing. Running around yelling, Charlie Kirk was a racist, so it's just fine that he was shot in the neck. That's not okay. There's no justification for that kind of violence. That person was trying to have an open debate. He risked life and limb in order to be able to use his mouth. And someone ended the debate for him. And that's because this person who we're worried if they're on the right or the left, well, they wouldn't have even been able to make an argument. Because that's a crazy person. If he was a right winger and all he wrote on the wall was a swastika with his poop, would you believe that that was the reason that he went and killed people? We need to stop this madness. We need to stop with the pointing fingers. We need to stop looking for monsters. There's plenty of them out there. And when we identify monsters, we need to just identify them as such. Study them. Figure out if we can maybe prevent it from happening in the future by identifying Unfortunately, all you can do with that person is catalog. If you go look at my other videos, literally as all of this was happening, I was talking about how there's never going to be a winning the debate or an end to the debate or a synthesis in the debate. And the reason is because you're gazing into an abyss. There is no way to win the debate when you're trying to win an emotion, when you're trying to get a hit of dopamine, flash of anger, whatever it is. There's no reason there, right? Like, no rational person would want to claim James Gum as their political affiliate, obviously, but there was a time that wouldn't have mattered. You literally would have just labeled that as a crazy person or a fringe person. We don't do that anymore. Now we have to label them on the side of Hitler. And think about it. It's not a very long leap if you ideologically believe that what you're doing is fighting Hitler, right? People talk all the time about, oh man, if you had a time machine, you could just go back in time and you could kill Hitler before World War II ever started. And that's what these people think. They think that they're fighting an existential threat. And where did that come from? Well, it came from what I like to call MK Ultra 2.0. So in the 1950s, 60s, I think all the way up to the 70s, MK Ultra went on for something like 30, 40 years before they actually found it out. Let me go look that up. How long did MK Ultra go on? 20 years, 53 to 73, and it only got halted after they got found out, after people died and there was investigations, but they just changed the name. That's what they always do. MK Ultra turned into a bunch of other different things like Project Stargate, and MK Ultra came directly out of Operation Paperclip. A lot of the things that they were doing in there were direct continuations of things that the Nazis that we got from Nazi scientists that we got from Operation Paperclip. They just continued their research under MK Ultra. You know, the stated goal of MK Ultra. Let's just see the stated goal of MK. To develop mind-controlled drugs and techniques for use against Soviet bloc enemies during the Cold War. The Soviet bloc was a fabled enemy during the Cold War. They weren't, other than they kind of beat us a little bit in the space race at first, they weren't really producing anything that mattered over there. Everything that they had was pretty much stolen from American blueprints. And I've talked to people that were like producing and manufacturing things during that time that were part of, you know, they talk about what's the meme, you know, in Soviet Russia, whatever, doorknobs you, I don't know what the joke is, something like that. Anyway, so that was the enemy that they were doing it with, but they wanted to develop a truth serum. So they wanted a substance like LSD, and they literally went and bought all of the pharmaceutical grade LSD that was available in the world. So they wanted a truth serum, possibly based on LSD. They wanted to control human behavior. Experimenters explored how to manipulate a person's mental state and alter brain function through psychoactive drugs, hypnosis, electroshock, and sensory deprivation. This actually doesn't list what they used on Ted Kaczynski. He was submitted to humiliation. That was pretty much all they did. They just played mind games with him in what Ted Kaczynski thought was a therapy program that was supposed to help him formulate his ideas and use his genius. And instead, what they did was they kind of took what was his thesis, and then they degraded him about it for I think 2 years or something that went on. And then he eventually went on to become the Unabomber. They wanted to create programmable agents. One of the more extreme objectives was to erase an individual's mind and implant a new controllable personality, similar to the Manchurian Candidate premises. But this right here, this mind control, this controllable personality, that's what your phone is. Your phone is, they don't need to even feed you LSD. See, that was the real trick that they ended up pulling with all of this. Was at some point in time in there, they figured out that they already controlled the radio waves and the TV waves, and that the TV was already a good way to get in there. So they started out by programming the TVs with flicker rates. And then you can actually go look at I don't know. I've never watched the show Mad Men, but I know what it's about because I've read all about that. I like sales and I like marketing. And so it's something that I've researched pretty deeply, and I know exactly what they were doing. They were grabbing on to the reason why people are like, oh, the ads are sexualized. Well, the reason why is because it's much easier to grab onto your limbic system, your sexual arousal, those things that are totally pretty much out of your control. You see a pretty human object and you have no choice but to feel desire, lust, attraction. And so if that thing happens to be holding an object, it makes that object magical. And this controlled all human behavior. So the consumer culture sprang from this. We didn't really have a consumer culture in the US prior to that. In fact, you had the Depression era culture. And I don't know if you've ever known anybody from the Depression era, but my uncle Richard was. And when we went over to his farmhouse, the pencils he had, there was a whole drawer that was full of nubs of pencils. So pencils that had been used and sharpened all the way down to where the little metal part of the eraser is. And that was left as a piece of point of pencil, so that if there was a time where he didn't have a full pencil or whatever, he had something in there to go use, and you could just go grab that tiny little piece. So if you think about half a toothpick, little piece of pencil. And that was the era before that. So there was not a consumer culture. In fact, it was the exact opposite. You kept everything. You kept what little there was because you didn't know what you might need to use to make it for something else. Everything was a hand-me-down. Farm culture still works that way. Now they just go buy those things at auction. But so they were controlling behavior. They wanted to create programmable agents. Does any of this sound familiar to you? You don't think that we have people that are running around that are out there doing things that they don't really understand exactly what they're doing, and they don't know where they got their ideas from because their brain got scrambled through 10-second TikToks? I can't emphasize this enough, that if a 10-second little video is enough to get inside of your brain and to make you believe a thing, make you angry, make you, a thirst trap, make you click through so that you'll go pay for an OnlyFans, whatever it is. All of those are realizing that humans are programmable, and they weaponized it and they put it inside your phone. As soon as they were able to make it smaller and smaller and smaller. In fact, Silicon Valley, originally, all of those people, Steve Jobs, when you talk about virtual reality, A lot of what they were programming into computers and what their vision for the future of computers was and what you could do with them as far as where we are with video games and simulating reality, etc., was that you'd be able to use what they were trying to do specifically was recreate the psychedelic experience. So these people in Silicon Valley were taking LSD. Obviously, it's California. They're out there on some sunshine acid. And then they have this great idea. Whoa, what if we could recreate this with a computer? The computer has a screen. We could make the screen show you whatever you want. We could recreate this. And if you go look at a lot of the original stuff that they did with it, it was pretty psychedelic. And for that reason, most of Apple's original same thing with like Volkswagen, whatever. There was a whole time there where they all went on this like hippie flower power psychedelic was, how they made everything look. That 70s show was really popular. All of that was very popular for a reason. It's because the people that grew up in that generation taking the psychedelics were now recreating it out in the world. And to get into psychedelics and MK Ultra again, what they wanted to do is take the LSD. Oh yeah, that's the thing that I wanted to figure out. Where did the CIA get all its LSD from? Swiss pharmaceutical company Sandoz. Okay. And then later from a U.S. company, Eli Lilly. They did buy the world's supply of it, though. CIA chemist Sidney Gottlieb grew concerned that the Soviet Union was stockpiling LSD for mind control and interrogation. See? So if the Soviet Union was doing it, says like that's why they're called spooks. Because like it didn't matter whether the Soviet Union was necessarily doing it or not, but we had to go buy all the LSD for that reason. Even though what we were really using it for was because we needed to be able to use it for our mind control program. And that's where you got the merry pranksters who had massive amounts of LSD, and they went around in a psychedelic bus. That's where the psychedelic movement really got its hold. See, those people were the ones that were writing books about it. And then after those people wrote books about it, people went and dropped out thereafter. But by, say, the summer of 69, for Hunter S. and for Ken Kesey and for the Merry Pranksters and Ginsburg and everybody involved, it was already pretty much over. Right? So they had already done it and written about it. And what they were writing about, specifically the Merry Pranksters and the electric Kool-Aid acid test, if you aren't aware, was they would have 2 servings available. You wouldn't know which it was. You could choose the one on the left or the one on the right, whichever it was. Call it, like the Pepsi challenge. And one of those Kool-Aids would have LSD in it and the other one wouldn't. And the whole idea was, can you pass through the acid test? And so half of the people were dosed, half of them weren't. And what they were on was some serious pharmaceutical grade LSD. And the CIA was watching it. They had Operation Midnight Climax. This was just an extension of that, essentially, where the CIA ran flop houses over in the Haight-Ashbury. And what they were involved possibly, so there was free clinics over there that known scientists, doctors that were involved with this CIA's MK Ultra, they were running this free clinic and at the Haight-Ashbury, and that was where Charles Manson and the family went to go get the girls treated for STDs and such, birth control, all of that. And so in that area, what they also did was they had flop houses with 2-way mirrors, and they had hookers there. And so you go in there, you'd be a John, you take a drink of some water. That water had LSD in it, and then they would watch you from a two-way mirror to go see what happened. And this went on for years. And so, long story short, they figured out that Well, what they did was they figured out the best way to do it was actually through the digital format and through technology. And so they spent decades perfecting that. And that's what your phone is. Your phone is this thing that can get inside your brain and make you do stuff. And if you mix that with psychotropic drugs and you go think about, there's a whole bunch of people in the conspiracy world that are always like Alex Jones, like, well, they're just on SSRIs. And so they're controlled by the SSRIs. That's what's making all these mass shooters. Every single one of them's on these mind chemicals. Okay, wait. So we have a mixture of mind chemicals programming you. And then if you've ever seen the movie A Clockwork Orange, there's a scene in there where they've got his eyes open and they're using the TV and drugs to program him. All of you sit on your couch or whatever for 4 hours a day at a minimum, looking at your phone. Half of you are on some type of mind control drug, SSRI, amphetamine, whichever it is, blue pills, green pills. Maybe you take a little bit of Xanax. Maybe you don't take any of that. Maybe you just go get some Kratom over at the store, or you smoke ganja, or you drink too much, right? All of those are things that they've fed you so that, I mean, what percentage of the population isn't on one of those things or many of those things that I just mentioned? And then you have your phone and your TV beaming images fast with text directly into your brain. I mean, that is what subliminal messaging, the definition of it was when they were doing it. And so before they did it to sell you items, now you can't afford to buy items anymore. Nobody can afford to buy anything, barely afford to pay rent. Is from what I understand, most people are like a $400 emergency away from destitute or a lost job away from destitute. So what else did they want to do with it? Oh, yeah, they wanted to discredit public figures. The project explored using drugs to promote illogical thinking and impulsiveness in individuals to the point where they would be publicly discredited. Does this not sound at all like things that you've seen happen to people that get discredited, that go say crazy things or do weird things? Developing other incapacitating materials. Researchers also worked on incapacitating agents, knockout pills, and substances that could induce confusion or physical weakness. So supposedly all of this ended in like 1973. But if you think that the government goes and spends 20 years working on those kinds of things, just ends because they got caught doing it, they just changed the name. And you don't know what name. I don't think any of us know exactly what name it's been under after. We know about MK Ultra. We know about Midnight Climax. We know about Mockingbird. We know about, right, the Contras. You know, we know about a lot of those. Those are not conspiracy theories. Every single one of those, though, every single one of those is enough to tell you that, okay, the government, Operation Northwoods, right? Okay, the government, especially the CIA, is really bad news. And we should have done something to stop and investigate it a long time ago. They killed Kennedy when he talked about trying to break up the CIA. So how does this bring us back to square one, the abyss? Well, that's what they did. They put the abyss in your hand. What do we call it? Doom scrolling? Rabbit holing? Whatever you want to call it. That's exactly what that is. They want you stuck in there. Again, chasing thirst traps. You got your little OnlyFans. Chasing conspiracy theories. Now you're worried about the flat earth, et cetera, et cetera. None of it's real. None of it's a lived experience. None of it's your idea. Like, If you had actually just put your phone down, you might have had an idea of your own and gone out in the world and done something